have to, I think, at all, but covered is a margin term. So if I'm a margin clerk, I say, Z, you've just created the obligation to buy 100 shares at 50. That's $5,000. So how do you plan on coming up with the $5,000? One thing, if you can't come up with an answer to this, by the way, 5,000 in your account would be perfect. I'd say, well, Z, I'm sorry to bother you. I see that you have $5,000 cash in your account. You have cash equal to the aggregate exercise price. You are covered. Now, $5,000 isn't a choice here. So I say, well, Z, what are you gonna do if somebody sticks it to you at 50? You say, I'm gonna stick it to somebody else at 55. I have an obligation to buy at 50, Dean, but I have a choice to sell at 55, and that would mean I'd make $500. I said, okay, well, then I'm not worried about you. These other ones, I'm worried about you because you have an October 50 put and a 45 put, and that's a spread, and that's a potential $500 loss. And I'd want that in your account. Another one I'm discussing with you right now is testable on your Series 7. So this is test prep vendors trying to turn people into margin clerks. 45 doesn't work because it's a loss. And to be covered, I've got to know how that's going to work out. A 55 put, and it's July. I said, well, the problem with the July 55 is going to expire, and you're still going to be exposed till October, right? Because you need to be able to have a choice to sell at a higher price, not a lower price, and it's got to be the same expiration. XYZ October 60 put. Okay, well, if you have an October 60 put, I'm looking at that one. Could cover the put with, oh, bastards at Kaplan. That says XYY.
Yep.
Now, so I was thinking why that wouldn't work. I go, that looks like that would work because, and I go, oh man, it's not the same underlying. Now, I don't think this is testable at all on your Series 7, and margin in general is not that big a deal on the test. I'm about to go on a little bit of a rant. One of my things I hate is they also tell you in test prep vendor material, something you not will see on the test, is that a short put could also be covered if you're short the stock. And I think that's stupid because you don't have to come up with any margin requirement to right to put on the short stock, but it's, an exposure to unlimited risk. So covered or uncovered in the context in which it's being used here, it's a margin clerk saying, Z, I'm kind of concerned about you having an obligation to buy 100 shares at 50. How do you plan on making good on that? How do you plan on covering that? Now, if you are taking a Series 4 someday, Z, or Series 9, then we would go into the margin requirement is 20% of the market value plus the premium less the out of the money amount would be what we would consider the margin to do this transaction. I wouldn't feel bad about that one at all. What's your next one?
All right. I dropped two
Oh, you
questions in
dropped
here.
two. All right. One, five,
I
two.
missed both, and this has to do with Muni new issue process. Just that maybe if you
Okay.
can
Okay.
cover
Yeah.
that.
Again. Well, I got to tell you, you are quickly becoming one of my favorite students because you uncover questions that Dean despises. And the reason I despise them, Z, is because they're not reflective of what you're going to actually see, which is a balance of easy and difficult questions. And a lot of test prep vendors, including Kaplan, have what I
Mhm.
call legacy questions, particularly as it relates to munis. The Series 7 used to be 2 3-hour sessions of 125 questions, and there were 55 questions on munis, and they really got in the weeds. But no test prep vendor wants to delete questions that nobody's seen for years.
Mm.
Even me, I'm guilty. I have a practice test I wrote 4 years ago, and it's still on my channel. I probably should delete it. But I'm like, it's still current, and nobody wants to say they have less practice tests than more, right?
Yeah.
All right, so determine the winning bid. So what would I know about a competitive bid on a muni bond? What I would know is that competitive bids, we'd probably find out about them test question with the notice of sale that would be published in the bond buyer. Test question, a newspaper widely read in the municipal market. And the various syndicates would be formed. And the person who wins is the one who provides the issuer with the lowest net interest cost. Kind of like how do you award your mortgage? You award your mortgage to the bank who's going to give you the lowest interest cost. If you go to a mortgage broker, I'm a mortgage broker, and you say, Dean, how many points did you make off this mortgage? I go, none of your damn business. See, what you care about is does it provide you with the lowest interest cost? Right now, the higher price we sell the bonds for, so this one's pretty tricky. The higher the price we can get for the bonds and give to the issuer, the lower their net interest cost. Right. So if I bid 110 for the bonds and you bid 105, I win because I gave the issuer more money. And that means that'll subsidize the interest that they're paying. Right. So
Yeah.
determine the winning bid. The one that used to be on the test is lowest net interest cost. And what this ends up being is the lowest net interest cost. Anyways, we subtract any premium for the total interest cost. What that reflects is the idea if I can sell the bonds for more money for the issuer, that money can be used to service the debt. So I don't think that's in plain English by any means, but that's what that means. We subtract the premium we got for the bonds because that helps you pay your interest issuer. You're paying $50 a bond this year, 5%, but I got you $50 more for the bond. So this year is free, so to speak. I just made up those numbers. Add any discount. Well, yeah, if we give you less money, then you're going to have to pay more interest, right? So if I give you less money, then you're going to have to not only pay the par, but you're going to have to pay the interest as well. Very, very difficult question. I don't think you'll see this like the previous one on your exam. I would consider both of these to be kind of legacy questions,
Okay.
questions that used to be answered back in the day, you know.
Mm.
Even if you did get them out right, I would, on the real world, give you probably two, three, four extra points. These are tough ones. Let's look at our next one. 1544075. Which of the following, well, it looks like you're in the Muni section, right?
Yeah,
I have a Muni bond lecture called Underwriting.
I have watched it.
Yeah,
Yes.
and if I haven't talked about it in that lecture, it's not testable.
Okay.
So, the one thing you can use my videos for is to confirm. Okay,
Okay.
which of the following competitive bids is most likely to be awarded the bid? So you're now they're asking you to play issuer and they're asking you who are you going to award your mortgage to? Which one of these syndicates are you going to let underwrite the bonds? So 6% with a premium. So that means again, I give you a higher price for your bonds. If I offer the issuer 110 for the bonds, 1,100, you offer the issuer 105, I win because I gave them more premiums over par, right? I mean, we said the premium can be used to subsidize the interest cost. So I offered the issuer a premium, B par, 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 right? So you'd rather get a higher price. And then by the way, as we look at C and D, a higher interest cost as well. So that ain't gonna win. Right? I mean, you don't want to pay 7% or 8%. You want to pay 6%,
Got it.
right?
Okay.
And then you want to pay a higher thing. Got any more?
Yes. All right. We'll stay in the same topic here. I got two
Yeah.
more.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, I wasn't looking at. No, 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 I looked at the chat. There it is. Okay. Uh, okay. Well, this one I think is a little more likely. Pre-refunded. So, the bond is rated triple B, so it's investment grade. All the following statements are true. So when we're pre-refunding the bond, I go to the issuer and I say, if I work in public finance, I say, listen, you have those triple Bs outstanding, and I know they haven't passed their call protection period. But what I'd like to recommend is that we sell some brand new bonds at today's lower interest rate, put the money into an escrow account, and that way, when those bonds pass their call protection period, we can call the bonds. I'll create an escrow account. So if we do what I'm suggesting, your triple B bonds will become triple A. because you owe the money, and I have an escrow account with the money in it because we're going to sell the new bonds to pre-refund the old bonds. So that money to pay those bonds is in an escrow account, and so certainly the pre-refunded bonds are now AAA. The issue is backed by government securities, yes, because in the escrow account we're buying what are called slugs, state and local government securities. These are securities expressly issued for escrow accounts to pre-refund bonds. So that's true. Funds required to meet debt servicing have been assigned in the escrow account. Yes. The old bonds are going to be more marketable. The reason A is not true is because it increases the marketability because now they're pre-refunded. They're AAA. There's an escrow account. And so that's why A is not true. I do think that you could get a test question on pre-refunded bonds. In my video on munis, I have an example of this where there's 5% bonds outstanding and we sell some new bonds at 2. And I have a little graphic there. And the test question is if you own the old bonds. So here we go. I say, hey, Z, you know those mini bonds you own? You, yeah, Dean, they're triple B. I'm hoping they're, and you're not calling to tell me they got downgraded because my goodness, I'd be less than investment grade. I said, no, actually, Z, I got some good news for you. You say, those bonds haven't passed their call protection period, Z. They can't call them from you even if they wanted to. And you say, well, Dean, why are you bothering me? I said, well, what they did, Z, is they pre-refunded those bonds. They sold new bonds, took the proceeds and put it in the escrow account. You go, great, Dean. They owe me the money and they got the money. I said, that's true. He said, well, nothing wrong with that. I said, no. Again, why are you bothering me? I said, well, Z, the bonds, when they pass their call protection period, are going to be called. You're not going to be able to hold these triple B bonds to maturity because that was the whole point of pre-refunding. And these bonds should be, and this is testable, quoted on a yield to call basis, right? Because the client who owns the old bonds isn't going to get to hold them to maturity. We also could have got to that same answer by knowing the only reason we'd be pre-refunding is because interest rates have gone down, right? You don't refinance your mortgage at a higher rate, right? If I ask why are you refinancing your mortgage, you're saying because I could get a lower rate, right? So that's another way. So if rates are down, then the bond's up, and it's likely it's going to get called. What's our next one in the chat here? 1558248. Wow.
This is a fun one.
Yeah. So
I
let's.
was just trying to figure out if there is
Yeah.
easier way to calculate this, if there's a
Well,
question like this.
I don't think you're going to have to. I don't even think you're going to have to calculate number of days of accrued interest. However, you should know that the buyer pays the seller the dollar amount of the accrued interest. So let's just go through the question. It's a 50,000 20-year 7% municipal bond with semi-annual payments M and Ats, which would be what May, March, and September. Yeah, March and September. The coupon payments. It's issued on March 1st. The full price of the trade on this bond with a 7% yield to maturity to settle on June 30th is closest to. Okay, well, we know it's got to be 50,000 something. And
Yeah.
we know that on September 1st, boom, we're going to get a payment, right? It says issued on March 1st. So we're not going to make that first interest payment because it would be too much of a mess to try and, close the syndicate and, print up the bond certificates and, print this thing. So this is called a long coupon. So you're picking some real tough ones here. So usually we would say that September payment is going to be a 6-month period. But actually, this is going to be a 7th month period because we're not going to pay that first coupon. So we're going to have, well, maybe you are March 1st, the full price of the bond. So we first calculate the number of days of accrued interest. So there's two ways to do that. You can either do what I call the long method, March, January, February, March, April, May, um, June, July, August. We calculate up to, but not including settlement date. So it says the bonds are going to settle on June 30th. And we don't count that day because that's when the bond belongs to the new owner. Every month has 30 days. That is very testable. And when you got paid on March 1st, it says issued on March 1st. That's doesn't include interest for March 1st. So the only number that could be in that first date would be either a 30 or a 16. If it was M&S 15, that would have been for up to, but not including the 15th. So that's one way you can calculate the accrued interest. Another way you can do it is with my shortcut. If you want to use my shortcut, you would take settlement June 30th, and you would subtract the last time it paid interest. And the last time it paid interest was March 1st. So whether we do it this way, and we come up with 119 days. I call that the long method for lack of imagination. Or whether you want to use my shortcut, I can't help you with this. 1 from 30 is 29, right? June 30th, 6 month of calendar. 3 from 6 is 3. And then you just got to remember that every month has 30 days. So I think it's more likely you would be tested. And again, very low probability about the number of days of accrued interest. All right, so now we have to figure out how much interest per day we're receiving or we are going to owe the seller. So what we want to figure out now is interest per day. And with math, there's a lot of ways to do things because then I'm just going to multiply that by 119. So 7%, I'm going to take 50,000. I'm going to times it by 7%. And I find out that's $3,500. And that's for the entire year. So see how I got the 3,500? I took the 50,000 and I times it by 7% and found out these bonds pay $3,500 a year. Now I need to figure out, as I said, interest per day. So now we're going to divide that by 360 because bonds trade on 30-day months, 360-day years, right?
Mhm.
Now I'm going to be able to establish the interest per day. I'm going to divide that by 360 and boom, 3,500 divided by 360. I get $9.72. And again, rounding will not mess me up. I'll be close enough to kind of squeeze the trigger here. So that's 972 in interest per day, right? Because I took the 3,500 annual interest and I divided to get the interest per day. And now I'm back in business. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, I owe the seller 119 days of accrued interest. Accrued interest is paid by the buyer to the seller. So now I'm going to take 3,500, divide by 360. I'm going to times that by 119, and I get 1,156.94. And then remember, I got to pay for the bonds. So I owe the accrued interest and I owe for the bonds.
Mm.
And so the answer there is A. So that's another tough one. Another tough one. So, what we can first got to do is figure out the number of days of accrued interest. I thought for first this was going to be a new issue problem, and it wasn't. So it was issued on March 1st and really had nothing to do with this question. However, what it was important is to know that March 1st doesn't represent interest for March 1st. So you can never have 29 days in that first month. You can never have anything other than 16. It's either 30 or 16 that first month. We said you're going to count from the last interest payment date, or in this case, March 1st, up to, but not including settlement. Settlement was June 30th. So the long method is simply to say, okay, I owe the seller for all of March, all of April, all of May, part of June. I count that up. The second way is to use the shortcut, and I figure out 119 days. That could be a test question, slow probability, but they could say, what is the number of days of accrued interest in this transaction? That is more testable than what I'm about to do next, which is actually figure out the dollar amount. So figure out the dollar amount. I got to figure out interest per day because I owe 119 days of accrued interest. So I took 50,000 times 7%. I found out it's 3,500 annually. I should know that munis and corporate bonds trade on 30-day months, 360-day years. So that was 972 a day. I times that by 119 days, and that is the dollar amount of the accrued interest that the buyer owes the seller. Now, remember, you also got to pay for the bonds. And it says the bonds were issued on March 1st, so we would assume they were issued at par. So we're buying them new, right? And par would be 50 bonds, would be $50,000. By the way, anytime in Kaplan or any test prep vendor, there's a 3-paragraph explanation. That's on them. You say, yeah, right. If they have to take that much time to tell you what the right answer is, it's probably not a good question. All right. Anything else for today?
I got an easy one in the same.
Okay. Yeah, let's put it in there. Hold on. Let me grab the. You're good at, by the way, if you get or even get in the ball game on these, you should feel pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's getting better. It's never 100% confidence, but
Yeah, no, you just got to keep practice, drilling, rehearsing. Under MSRB rules regarding municipal securities, a control relationship. I think of Merrill Lynch and Bank of America. That's a control relationship. So here, a control relationship as it relates to munis means my firm was called Gamma Global Investments. I'm the managing member of Gamma Global Investments, my broker dealer, and I decided it'd be fun to sit on the city council. And the city council goes to underwrite some bonds. I go, hey, that's what I do for a living, and my broker calls you to sell you the bonds and says, you say, do you like the bonds? Says he, we love the bonds. Our managing member, Dean Tenney, represents both our broker dealer. He's the managing member of Gamma Global Investments. He's also a member of the city council. And so we only need to disclose to you a control relationship. It's unlikely I don't like the bonds. Am I going to tell you I don't like the bonds? I love the bonds. What would you think a Merrill Lynch broker is going to tell you about Bank of America? Good things or bad things? Probably good things, right? I would be
yeah.
surprised. Yeah, I mean, he's probably not going to say Brian Monahan is, overpaid and underworked. Right? So, offers of the employees of the broker dealer hold positions of authority. Yep, that's true. Officials of the municipal issuer hold policy man the broker. There you go. 1 and 2. Right? 1 and 2. So this is where you represent both the issuer. Says I gave you. I think the easier way to understand this is on the corporate side, right? There's a control relationship between Merrill and Bank of America. As a Merrill Lynch broker, I can't use my discretionary authority to buy you Bank of America stock. And you say, why, Dean? Why are you bothering me? I say, well, I think you should buy the stock, but there's a control relationship, right? Any others?
So number 3 there.
The
So
municipal
why did
issuer
not?
is a public finance client of the broker dealer. Well, no, that's that. It says regarding municipal securities, a control relationship that needs to be disclosed, but that is not a control relationship. Morgan
Okay.
Stanley is a financial advisor for the city of San Francisco in public finance. That is not a control relationship. A control relationship would be if Ted Pick sits on the city, he's the CEO of Morgan Stanley. If he sits on the city council of San Francisco, that's a control relationship. So 3 needs to be disclosed, but that's not a control relationship,
Okay.
right? You live in San Francisco, that's not a control relationship. The way I think it is a control relationship is when somebody represents both the issuer and the broker dealer. I mean, not as a represent as a financial advisor, where they actually are an officer, or a director, or a city council member, or the mayor, right? Maybe I decide to become the mayor of my hometown. That'd be silly while I'm still a broker, but let's say I do, right? Now I'm the mayor and I'm also a broker, and there's a control relationship. What we're hoping is I don't tell to use my firm. All right, we got another one.
Yes, this one is also another easy one. I understand why, the question is the answer.
Okay, let's see. Oh,
Good.
I don't like these paragraph ones. Yuck. Jan Smith, a customer of the firm, says her uncle gifted her 17,000 upon the birth of her child. She wants to invest the money for the child's education, which starts in 18 years. She wants to be sure the principal will increase. That is the key phraseology there. Without the worry of stock market. Ooh, another hint. So for somebody who needs a set sum of money at some future date, a zero coupon bond would be wonderful. And the treasury version of a zero coupon bond is a treasury strip. And zero coupon bonds, very testable, are good for somebody who wants to have a set sum of money at some future date. Right. So we're going to buy a $17,000 zero. They're magical, by the way, because they go up as they get closer to maturity. Right. I bought my friend's daughter one, and she calls me and goes, "It goes up every year." I go, "Well, yeah, it's going to continue to go up until it matures." Right. Now, remember on those zeros, you got to do straight line amortization upward called accretion, and that imputed interest you owe taxes on.
So if we didn't have A, could D be an answer? Because that was my first
No, because
understanding.
then you would be getting the treasury bonds, interest rates could go up and the bonds could go down. You wouldn't have that principal going up every year. So that's the reason it's that not B, right? And then you have those payments that you have to decide how to reinvest it. Your rate of return's not locked in. So it's not so much the B is wrong, it's just A is a better answer.
I mean D, actually
D.
D.
There's no such thing as an UTA. There's the utmost.
Ah, okay.
There's uniform transfer.
They got me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, be careful. Kaplan are bigger jerks than real jerks. Good news, right?
Okay.
All right. Anything else?
All right, let me just double check to see if I have other questions here. There's one here regarding sales charge.
Okay. What's the number?
I put it in the chat.
Yeah, 155. This is the last one. Mom just pulled in. I gotta go check in with mom.
Sounds good.
Individual owns Class A shares, so that means they have a larger amount to invest. They got a long-term time horizon. It has a total value of 20,000. It has a sales charge of 8% that reduces to 5% at 25,000. If the fund offers rights of accumulation and the customer and this is additional 10, I like this. With rights of accumulation, the entire amount that crosses gets the break point. So, even if she just gave me here a 5,000, even if she just made it by the hair of her chinny chin chin, the entire amount that crosses gets the reduced sales charge. So she invested 10,000, 5% on 10,000 is $500. Right? She's paying the 5% sales charge because she crossed the break point.
So
Right?
if we didn't have, in the question, if we didn't have the fund offers a right of accumulation, would it be 5% in the entire
It's
25,000
always
or?
going to be 5% on the entire amount that crosses. So here's the amount we have already. The break point is 25. So if we invest 5,000 or more, 5,000 or more, the entire amount is going to be charged 5%. So what if I told you instead to send me $4,999? That would be a breakpoint sale, right? Because that would keep you under the five. So you got to be able to contrast rights of accumulation with a letter of intent. With rights of accumulation, which this is, you're not getting any rebate on the 20. You paid 8, and you're getting nothing back on that. But when you finally do cross, right? So Z, for those of you who may be watching, this is a replay of an office paid hours for students who pay money. So Z is a paid student, so she gets this free call as often as I put it up. And Z, sometimes people ask me, do I have break points? or letters of intent on tutoring? And here's the test question, right? I say, I do not offer a letter of intent. I don't allow you to agree to buy X number of hours of tutoring, and then I'll sell you it to you at a reduced rate. I don't do it. I do offer rights of accumulation. After you've proven you're a good customer and you bought some tutoring, well, then maybe I'll get you a reduced sales charge. Right? I just had a guy who I helped with his 24. I don't usually let people run tabs either, but hey, he spent a lot of money with me already. Good news, he passed his 24 today, and he owes me, $4,000. In his case, when I invoiced him, I said, I'm giving you a deal.
Mhm.
We've done a lot of business together. I always tease Z at some point, I'll be out of your life, good news or bad news. I come into his life where I told him, always tease people. Yeah, his name is Mark. I say, Mark, I came into your life for a reason and a season. The reason is to get you past your 24, and the season is how long it took us. Took us a little longer, but hey. And now, hey, I'm glad to have you in my life as not a 2D, but just a heck of a nice guy. And he said, well, hey, can we continue to talk? I go, absolutely. All right, anything else for today?
I think this should be good.
Okay, and then
Thank you so
remember, I
much.
put up the office hours. There's another one up, I think. So if not, just send me a thing and I'll put another one up.
Okay,
Okay. All
awesome.
righty.
Thank you.
Remember, inch by inch, your Series 7's a cinch, yard by yard, your Series 7 hard. And Z, I'm very proud of you. I know how much dedication, discipline, organization it takes to find these kind of questions. So, so you've got some doozies here. The last two or three I thought were on the broad avenues and highways of your exam. Those first two or three, I don't mind talking to you about them, but yeah, I doubt you would encounter those. So,
All right,
all right.
perfect.
Talk to you later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.